Recovery means to me is freedom and peace.
There is hope.
Recovery is awesome.
Recovery works.
Recovery is possible. There is hope.
Recovery is possible. There is hope.
Recovery to me means freedom. Recovery is possible.
Recovery works. Recovery is always possible. It's fantastic.
Progress, not perfection.
Recovery is possible.
Recovery works.
Recovery is a journey, not a destination.
Welcome to Montana's Peer Network Recovery Talks podcast. I'm Jim Haney, Executive Director.
And I'm Kayla Myers, a family peer supporter.
Thanks for joining me today, Kayla. It is National ADHD Awareness Month. And so we're going to talk about ADHD, and you've been very open about having a diagnosis. And so we thought, just come on and just have a conversation about it.
Yeah, and thank you for asking me.
Yeah.
I think I understand more about my diagnosis the more I talk about it in these kinds of forums where I can understand and process how it affects me, and hopefully somebody listening will feel more in tune with themselves and feel more understood with a peer talking about it in the ways that we do within these podcasts or these forums.
Excellent. Yeah. I don't think we've ever done a podcast on this topic. I've been trying to think about that over the years, and I don't think we have. I don't think we've ever done one. So thanks.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So let's jump right in with before you were diagnosed, what were the kinds of things you experienced, like, beforehand, and then we'll get into the getting diagnosed and all of that. So did you have any awareness that there was something different, or what was that like, and when did that happen? Was it when you were younger or when you got older? Or
No, see, in my experience, I feel like kind of has been a complete 180 now, knowing what I know later in life. But my younger brother was diagnosed when he was pretty young, and so most of my childhood, that was my example of what ADHD looked like. And it looked very different than me. It felt very different. It looked very different. Things that he struggled with, weren't things that I struggled with, or I guess I had a better understanding on how to deal or cope, or I guess I'm not really sure. I haven't really dived too much into that. Like, yes, I know now how it affected me and like more of my teens, early adult, into becoming a mother.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, when I was younger, that was my example, and it wasn't me.
So you said, I'm not like you. I see the differences. I'm not like you, and you have this diagnosis, so that can't be me.
Yeah, and I almost, looking back, I feel a sense of me feels some regret and some shame that I wasn't able to be a peer in a sense to my brother. I guess peer to peer is not really like brother and sister, but I remember thinking like, man, Nathan just has all these struggles, and I just feel so bad for him that he's struggling this badly, or it's presenting itself more loudly than it was presenting, I guess, within me. And I remember thinking that, we're saying that to him, like, I'm sorry that this is something that you are struggling with. And I felt guilty when I was younger that it wasn't something that I had to internally deal with. It was more externally. I was a support to him. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's wild now. I used to like I used to think that, or I'd say that to him. And now it's kind of comical to me looking back, where I'm like, look, after getting my diagnosis, now I'm like, oh man, that was something that I felt bad for. And here all along, things were probably affecting us very similarly. His just were more outwardly obvious than the ways it presented within me.
Did you feel like you were normal and he wasn't normal?
Yeah, because I think you and I have talked about this before. So like I now, with the lived experiences that I have, and the lived experience of loving the people that I love in my life, I have a lot more knowledge around the term normal. I don't think many people walk around in this life with a normal brain or a normal story. I think all of us have something. And now that there's more talk about mental health and diagnoses and trauma, I mean, I think we're all walking around with something. But yeah, these diagnoses like depression, anxiety, ADHD, autism, those were very big things. It wasn't just like everybody had something in those times. That those were the extremes. If you had a diagnosis of something, that was an extreme to me in my examples around me.
When did you start to have symptoms, or did you start to suspect there was something going on with you? How old were you and what was that like?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say I suspected anything, but definitely when I moved out of my, like my small town that I grew up in, and I went to college and I lived with a roommate, but I wasn't under the care of an adult at that point anymore. I was the adult. I would say that that's now when I think back about timelines, that's when I was starting to have those like really bad anxiety attacks. And I didn't know why. They literally would just come out of nowhere. That was when I would say things started slowly kind of unraveling within me. I did okay in school, but it was really hard to, find the motivation to stick with it. And then I think it became such a reminder of all the things that I was lacking internally. And so then I think that was why it was presenting more like anxiety and depression within me, probably early on. But I would definitely say, when I became a mom, still didn't really have an idea of why, or of ADHD being even on the table. Being in charge of myself was already, I think, hard enough to keep up, to remember, like remembering the small little things, not getting distracted, staying on task. But then when you are in charge of another human being, that just adds a whole other component to this. And so then I added another human being. So now it's not only me, it's two other human beings. I was married. I had a, household to keep up with. I was a stay-at-home mom. And I would say that was when I really can now pinpoint, like, my anxiety was almost the thing that kept me fueled. Like, if I was anxious, I knew that I was still, I was still motivated enough to not feel anxious so that I would get X, Y, or Z done, or not forget, these appointments, or make sure that this is in the kids' backpacks. But then like I would get on it, like, I'd pack for a trip, and then I'd get to the destination and it would be freezing and everybody had everything they needed. But I would have forgotten like my toothbrush and my like winter coat, or a pair of tennis like shoes that would be, for cold weather. Like that kind of stuff happened constantly. So like, but yeah, still was showing up, I guess. Anytime I would talk to a doctor or a counselor, it was still, that anxiety, depression. I tried medication. I tried making lists. I literally tried all of it. And then it was kind of like during I would say like around COVID time. That was when I was working full time. I had 2 kids at home. So it was just like this chaos constantly within my mind and my body. I just was overwhelmed to the brink. And would be on TikTok and these videos of like put a finger down, ADHD edition. And it was more like, then it started kind of like, because then it just picks up your algorithm. And then it's like more and more of those videos. And every single time I would watch one, I was like, oh my God, that's me. Like it was explaining, it was like a checklist of me, basically. And then I was like, I think that's so silly because I think terms are thrown around very.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I was protective of my brother and protective of my son who has autism. So people that are like, don't we all have a little case of the tisms, or don't we all have 80, things that are OCD and
Right.
So like,
That's the one I was thinking of. Yeah.
I just didn't like that. And so I was like, no, I think that's just an excuse, or like, that's just easy to kind of do in today's world. And then the more and more I dove into it, I tried talking to my primary care doctor, and I was like, I'm pretty sure I have ADHD, and like everything I was describing about, so like anxiety being my that was when I was so anxious that I would like try to keep up, and then I would hit this like not depression, like not a full on but it was almost just this like no motivation, where I was like so burnt out. I was, felt shame. I felt not good enough. I felt rejection from anybody could have said anything to me, and I would have felt just this deep sense of, like I'm never going to be able to keep up, and I'm never going to be able to do a good job. And I'm never, because I try, and it doesn't ever work, because I always get back to this place where I'm never going to be able to X, Y, or Z. And so, but then that's, to my doctor, sounded like a mood disorder. It was always like every time I would try to bring it up in these situations, it would always sound like a mood disorder. And then I finally got into see a psychiatrist, and I had like a 3-hour evaluation, and I was diagnosed with CPTSD, so complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and ADHD. And I was put on medication, and my whole life has completely changed.
What was that like? What was that like getting, I mean, you got a double diagnosis there. So what was that like when you were first told? Were you sitting in the office when they told you, or did they call you, or?
No, he told me, right. We talked through each. I didn't know what he was doing at the time, but basically this 3-hour evaluation, each section is like they're crossing off, these mood disorders or whatever it is. And so it was this, I think it was like the most validating. I wasn't sad. I think it was like the most validated I felt and empowered I felt for not allowing professionals to tell me what was happening within inside my own self, and that I really set out and educated myself on what it looks like and how it presents. And I didn't let other people tell me what was going on with inside of myself for so long that I couldn't explain. And I think for me, it was very empowering, and I finally felt heard and seen for the first time. And those aren't like great diagnoses to have. It's not like I'm like, yay, I got them. But like, at least I know that I did all of the things that anyone ever asked me to do. And then it didn't work for me. And I knew that, I felt it within myself that like something else was going on. And I think it was it was the most empowered and confident in my own decision making and my own sense of self for the first time in a long time, and having that validated, even though it's like on a piece of paper, like who cares? But for me, it was a very empowering when I walked away from that appointment. So I'm sure a different experience for everybody, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Did the psychiatrist then put you on medication?
Yeah. We started medication. I remember the first day I took the medication, I was standing, I was like in the house, and I think the kids had just, like, I had dropped off the kids and I was coming back to like start work, and like, I don't know how to describe it. It was like, it's almost like this like buzz is constantly happening around me. Like, I can hear my own like self dialogue. I can have like a conversation, like how a conversation was going to go, like just like oh, did I put this in their back, like all of this. It's just like this constantly. It's almost like it's raining and the windshield wipers are like going, and like music is blaring, like it's just kind of like this constant buzz. And all of a sudden everything just stopped, and I was like, I remember like looking around the room, like where did all that noise go? And I just felt this sense of like calmness. And I was like, okay, like, what do you need to do, Kayla? Like, I could think and process and feel the moment instead of being so overwhelmed by like the buzz. I don't know how to describe it. It was the weirdest most I don't know. I think that's how it was, like the first time in my life that I had been put on a medication, besides it like being like an antibiotic or like a pain med after surgery, when you can feel that instant like, oh yeah, this is working for what it's intended to work for. And I think it was like the first time I took something where I was like, whoa, my brain felt not normal. I hate that word, but my brain felt content. Yeah.
How was it to tell other people? So you get this diagnosis, you get some medication. What was that like, having to tell, were there other people you told?
Yeah, I think I was slow to tell just anybody, because I was also, when I was like in my recovery journey within my own mental health. And I think one of the symptoms, how it presents within women, is you can be a chatty Cathy and you can overshare. And I mean, that's how it presented within me. And so I think for a very long time, whether it was a trauma response or something with my ADHD, I'm not still entirely like sure on that. But yeah, I was an overshare, where I would think I was doing it in a sense that like somebody would hear it and understand what I was saying, not just like hearing my words. And so, but I learned over time that could then turn into the wrong people getting all of the information about me, and or people that just don't care and can, turn into a sense of rejection. And so that was in the time where I was being very selective with who knew just everything about where I was at and what I was doing within my day to day, and especially with like my mental health journey. I felt like it was sacred to me, and I owed it to myself to figure out what was going to work for me and not have everybody else's like opinions and thoughts and criticism and what ifs like incorporated with that. And so yeah, I was just very selective at that time, but slowly I did. And and then everyone's like, oh, that makes so much sense. And I'm like, yeah.
So people agreed once you had the diagnosis, then people said, oh, that agreed. I agree. That's what's been wrong with you this whole time.
Yeah. Oh, cool. You got a pill for that? Nice. Yeah.
So, you mentioned the thing with women. Did you want to talk a little bit more about that? I know in our warm up you were talking about that, how it might be different in women than men. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's a lot of I don't know all the percentages, and that would just be a really boring thing to dive into in a podcast, but like the amount of women that get diagnosed, and especially a lot of the families that I work with children with special healthcare needs, it's very interesting. So like their kids will get a diagnosis before they do, and then like later, like me, they're still like there's still something going on with me. Like why can't I keep up? And there's been a handful of moms who have children with a diagnosis of ADHD, autism. It's more of those developmental disabilities that I'm seeing, who later in life, in their like 30s, will receive a diagnosis of ADHD. And I don't think there's been enough research done like to pinpoint exactly why that has happened. I just think it presents very differently with like, like let's talk little kids. So like boys and girls. So like I think boys, like I was saying before, with my brother and I think boys are more outwardly, they show more outwardly than girls and women would.
Yeah.
Yeah. You'd see the like inattentiveness, the hyperness, the like impulsiveness. Yeah.
Right.
And with girls, I think they're more like it's more in their head and their brain activity than it is. Yeah.
Because it's kind of, I don't know a lot about it, but I know a little bit. And I know that there's some real controversy around ADHD, and is it a legitimate diagnosis, or is it really something else? And it looks very different in men and women. And is that a societal thing? Is that just how we address men and women in our society? So then we say, oh, that's just like you mentioned earlier, the chatty Cathy thing, right? Like, is that just how we group it? Is that what it is? But there's also the controversy around the medication for children, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, giving kids like things like Ritalin, right? And I've always wondered, especially as I get older, and I sort of look back at my life and I think, well, maybe we're just all a little bit different, and that anything that's outside the normal range, we say, oh, well, you must have this.
Yeah.
Oh, you must have that, right? But what if what we consider normal is just societal norms and isn't really the real range? The real range might actually be much wider, and that some people might be more hyperactive. And I hate to even use that word, but some people might be more that way. Some people might be more depressed. Just in general, that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. And my understanding with my own diagnosis of, for something to be a disorder, it has to interfere with your regular functioning in life. But yet there's many of us who function with a diagnosis, and it doesn't always impact, like it might at times, right? But then it's just like, this is how you are. That's why I asked you in the beginning about the question, did you just view yourself as just normal? It's like, well, my brother is this way and I'm just normal. Like,
yeah. I think, now looking back, I think, there's a term called masking, like within, and I think that is something that I was doing. It was, whether it was masking, I could mask it. I think that there's, like Bryce has autism, my son, and he is, I think, the perfect example of like he has a disability. It is very apparent. It affects him every single day.
Right.
From the moment he wakes up, from the time he goes to sleep, while he's sleeping, his is very, apparent. And I do one day hope to, be so far in my mental health recovery journey that I don't have to be medicated, and that I can find the tools and tricks and tips and things. Yeah, because I think before I was living okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying is,
But I was
right.
also very anxious and depressed. You know, like I was a walking recipe for, you know, I don't know, yeah, just like being constantly anxious, overthink, like. So I think for me, it's more of giving my brain and my nervous system and my all of it like a chance to kind of like calm down and to catch up with who I am, where my life has been, and where I am headed. And for now, I think it's really helping me keep a sense of focus on the present and what I need to get done in today, and what I don't need to worry about today. And then until I become confident enough in those, because I'm, you know, it's something I'm actively working at. I've talked to my psychiatrist about this many times, that eventually I do want to, you know, have other tools in place besides just medication, and not be dependent on taking a medicine. Not saying, I think that there's, it really has changed. It really has changed my life. And I'm grateful for it being something that I could take to feel a sense of, you know, calmness. But I also think now, knowing as far as I am in my recovery journey, I do know that there's other tools out there that I think would be just as effective. And so that's my goal. That's my like future.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah. My future goal with it. So yeah.
That's good. Did you want to share? I think you have some. Did you want to share some statistics? I think that was something that we were talking about. Just
I don't really have like super. I don't have like numbers and stuff, but I just kind of wanted to share. You know, those like put a finger down. No, just we don't have to do it like that. Of like how it showed up for me, or how it can still show up for me at times. So I would say, like, early on, I would hear all the time, like, oh, you're just so sensitive, and like being able to like crying easily, having like, if someone is what is being perceived as if you're being criticized, you know, that rejection to that criticism is a very intense thing. I don't think all people with an ADHD diagnosis feel rejection sensitive dysphoria, but that can be one of the characteristics. And I would say that that's how it presented within me, which then I think to other people it looks like low self-esteem. Like, I was just joking with you, and why do you have to be so sensitive, and why are you always crying, and like, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings, and and so that can lead, for women especially, that can lead down a road of, you know, immense self-loathing, self-doubt, self-criticism. And I think there is a statistic that women with undiagnosed ADHD, and that being one of the components, that rejection sensitive dysphoria, they're 4 times as likely to have depression, to have like self-harming and suicidal thoughts, because of that constant thing playing out in their head. So I think that that's like one of the biggest things for me. I feel compelled to speak about it because I know, I'm sure there's somebody out there that feels all of those things and don't, you know, I'm sure they're really hard on themselves to try not to feel sensitive, or not to feel hurt by all, you know, the things that they can't control. But I do think that that's something that needs to be acknowledged, because it's real. I would say, like, it's hard to regulate when you don't have a sense of what is happening within you. Like I did before, you have a really hard time regulating your thoughts, and then what behaviors you have because of your thoughts and the emotions that go with it. So it's a really, I would say it's not like a lack of, like the definition is attention deficit. I would say it's like just the opposite. Like I pay so much attention to my thoughts, my feelings, I feel like it's such a like wrong terminology for what ADHD actually is and what it feels like to have ADHD. Like, trust me, I don't have a lack of attention. Like, yes, I have a lack of attention to these, my everyday tasks, but it's not a lack of attention to thoughts, behaviors, emotions, other people's thoughts, feelings, behaviors, emotions. Like, if anything, for me, it was like those words don't ring true. Attention deficit. No, yeah. Feeling overwhelmed, and not feeling overwhelmed in this how I would say people without ADHD would feel. Like, yes, I think everyone feels overwhelmed, but it's almost this spiral of like the littlest things can make you feel the biggest sense of overwhelming. Like, it's because like now those things will happen, and now that I don't know if it's because I'm medicated or like my nervous system, all of the stuff I was talking about before. Now I have like the tools in place to not feel as overwhelmed. But yeah, that sense of overwhelmingness inside of you is just, it's like crippling. Your brain is just constantly busy. You're hyper, like more like talkative, daydreaming, easily distracted. And so like a couple of the things that like, just are like little silly things that like, so like I used to hear a song or like I still do. I hear a song and I'm like, oh my God, I love this song. And I will play it constantly. Like I can't get enough of it. Like that's all I want to listen to. And then you just like burn yourself out on it. Like, so I could listen to it on repeat for a month and then be like, yeah, I don't like that anymore. And that happens also with foods. Like if I eat something that I'm like, oh my, it's like a hyper fixation on these like weird things. So like, yeah, like if I try something new at a food place and I'm like, that's all I want. It's like every time I think about food, that is what I want. And then I'll eat it so much and I'm like, I don't like that. Yeah. Hyperfixation is a huge one. Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's
coffee
funny.
Having like the opposite effect. I could drink a cup of coffee at 9 p.m. and like sleep like a baby. I remember people would be like, you're gonna have caffeine right now? I'm like, yeah. If anything, like in the morning, I'm like, it doesn't do anything for me. If anything, I feel like it makes me more tired sometimes. So
that's interesting. Yeah.
Just like these weird little things that have happened that now I'm like, oh, that makes more sense.
So if there's somebody listening and they're relating to some of what you're talking, what would you recommend they do?
Yeah, I mean, you can always reach out to me. I'm a family supporter in Montana. Well, I can talk to families all across the state of Montana, or if you have a trusted like a primary care doctor or a counselor, or get those conversations started. Like I said, if they weren't going the way that they were going for me, and they're more discrediting your take on what is actually happening within inside of you and labeling it with something different, don't take those words as like what the final decision or verdict is. But I would say, I think the thing that really changed for me was like seeking out a psychiatrist. Like, I think primary care providers are fantastic, but they see people every single day for all different kinds of things. Psychiatrists went to school to, that's what they do every single day is,
psychiatry.
Yeah, that's exactly. And so I think them diving in and doing a 3-hour evaluation instead of just like a 15-minute appointment where you're like, oh my God, I finally got in. And then you're like, I feel blah, blah, and off you go. Yeah. So, I think it's a lot more of a fair assessment into what is actually happening than just what could possibly be happening. So, yeah, I think that would probably be psychiatrist. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Kayla, for coming on and, being open and talking about it and sharing your experience and, and the listener, thank you for tuning in to another Recovery Talks podcast. Again, if you related to anything Kayla was talking about, reach out to, doctor, general practitioner, preferably a psychiatrist. You can have an evaluation done and find out what's going on for yourself. Or talk to somebody else like Kayla who has that similar experience and listen to what they have to say and share your experience. I
would also say now being in the peer world, and I think before when I would overshare or overtalk, I think I was searching for somebody that just understood, and now working in this world, I know what that is now. I know what the term is for it. So I think don't shy away from sharing what you're actually going through, because it could save you a lot of heartache and pain and suffering if you just actually are honest with what is really happening within your mental health. Finding a peer, I think, number one, to validate your experience is huge, and then you can embark on a journey of counselor, psychiatrist, or whatever that looks like, because they are the professionals, and I do think that it's very that's where you ultimately need to end up, is speaking to a professional, but don't discredit what you are going through and what your experience is. And I'm sure there's a peer out there that can validate and hear you and emotionally support you in what you have experienced. So I think both are very important.
Right. Well, again, thank you. And another great podcast, another good topic. So
thanks for letting me ramble.
No, it's good. It's good. Thank you to the listener for tuning in, and check us out each week with other Recovery Talks podcasts. Thank you.
There's always hope. Recovery is possible.
Recovery works.
There is hope in recovery.
Healing takes time.
Recovery means resilience.
You can get through anything. Recovery works.
Recovery rocks!